Welcome to South Portland, Maine, a vibrant coastal city of nearly 27,000 residents, known for its working waterfront and charming residential neighborhoods. It's located just across Casco Bay Bridge from Portland, and it offers a dense suburban feel with stunning ocean views. Frequently named one of the best places to live, the city is often praised for its quality of life and welcoming community atmosphere, where people believe they knew their neighbors. But in the summer of 1991, one of those homes would become the center of a mystery that would haunt the community for years. Because inside a modest ranch house on a busy road, police would eventually discover something horrifying. A woman, wrapped in plastic, buried beneath the basement floor. And the man investigators believe put her there had been living above her body the entire time. This is the story of Pearl Bruns.
In a world full of noise, we follow the facts. This is true crime, no noise. In a world full of noise.
Part 1. A woman everyone knew. Pearl Ann Bruns was born in Biddeford, Maine in 1943. She grew up during a time when Maine's economy was still powered by fishing, mills, and the working waterfront. By the time Pearl was an adult, she had become part of that world. She worked long days in a fish processing plant, packing and preparing the catch that came in from the Gulf of Maine. This was hard work, it was cold work, and the smell of fish was something that followed the workers home. But Pearl didn't seem to mind. Friends described her as social, outgoing, and deeply loyal to the people that she loved. She was the type of person that made friends easily. Someone who could walk into a bar and know half of the room. And after work, that's exactly where she often went. In the 1980s, Portland waterfront culture, local bars where fishermen, dock workers, truck drivers, and seafood packers would gather after their long shifts. It was at one of those very places that Pearl met a man named William Bill Bruns. Part 2. Bill Bruns. Bill Bruns was older than Pearl, more than a decade older. He was a fish hauler, a truck driver, who transported seafood from Maine to markets across the Northeast and into Canada. This was demanding work, long hours, long drives, and a lifestyle that often revolved around bars, diners, and the road. Bill had already been married several times. Pearl also had been through multiple marriages. They bonded over shared struggles, and in 1986, they got married. They moved into a small ranch-style home on Broadway in South Portland. And from the outside, their life looked normal. But behind closed doors, things were not always peaceful. Part 3. Trouble in the marriage. Friends would later say that the relationship was volatile. There were arguments, sometimes loud ones. Money was often a source of tension. Alcohol played a role in many of their fights. Pearl had a pattern of leaving the house when arguments got escalated. She would stay with friends, sometimes in Old Orchard Beach, and sometimes elsewhere. She'd disappear for a few days, and then she'd come back. Because of this pattern, when she vanished in August of 1991, some people initially assumed the same thing had happened again. But this time, something was very different. Part 4. August 11th, 1991. On August 11th, 1991, Pearl and Bill argued. Once again, the subject was money. The argument escalated, voices raised, tempers flared. According to Bill Bruns, he eventually left the house. He said he drove out to get Chinese food for dinner. When he returned home later that night, Pearl was gone. At least, that's the story he told the police. Part 5. A daughter knows something is wrong. 3 days later, Pearl's daughter, Elaine Woodward, became concerned. Pearl had not shown up for a family gathering. She wasn't answering her phone. And that was extremely unusual. Elaine and her mother spoke frequently, sometimes even multiple times a day. So Elaine drove to the house that Pearl shared with Bill. What she found immediately raised alarm. Pearl's black Cadillac Fleetwood was still in the garage. Now, Pearl loved that car and she rarely went anywhere without it. Inside the house, Elaine noticed something else. The latest newspaper sitting in the house was from Sunday, August 11th. The day Pearl disappeared, something was wrong. Very wrong. Elaine called the police. Part 6. The first investigation. South Portland police responded to the call. Detective Linda Barker was assigned to the case. And when Barker entered the home, she immediately began making observations. In the bedroom, she saw a suitcase lying open and disheveled. There appeared to be a reddish stain on the side. And in other areas of the house, there were small spots that looked like they could be blood. Then Barker stepped outside. Elaine showed her something else. A bulkhead door leading down into the basement. When Barker opened it, she saw something disturbing. What looked like blood stains on the stairs leading down. And at the bottom of the basement stairs was a dirt crawl space, and some of the soil appeared disturbed. Officers began digging. They hoped desperately that Pearl was not buried there. They dug and they dug and they dug, and they found nothing. Part 7. Critical decision. Now, despite the suspicious evidence, the case was initially treated as a missing persons case. The local police chief had known Bill Bruns for years, and he believed it was possible that Pearl had simply left, but not everyone agreed. A local reporter covering the story believed that something was wrong. She contacted someone she knew in the Maine Attorney General's office, and when that official heard the details, he reportedly responded with a profanity. And soon, the Maine State Police were brought in. Now investigators were looking at the case differently, not as a disappearance, but as a possible murder. Part 8. The house tells a story. Investigators returned to the Bruns home. This time, they brought forensic tools, and one of them was luminol. This is a chemical that reacts with traces of blood, even if someone has tried to clean it. And when investigators sprayed luminol throughout the house, the results were shocking. The house lit up. Blood traces appeared across multiple rooms, blood spatter on the walls, footprints in blood, bloodstains leading down the stairs, and in the basement, a long smear consistent with a body being dragged. Investigators now believed a violent assault had taken place inside the home. They still had one problem. They had no body. And without a body, proving a murder would be extremely difficult. Part 9. The purse. Then another piece of the mystery surfaced. In September of 1991, nearly 2 months after Pearl disappeared, a hiker in Crawford Notch, New Hampshire, discovered something on the side of the road. A purse. Inside it were identification cards, a checkbook, loose diamonds, and that purse belonged to Pearl Bruns. The location was interesting because the road ran along routes that Bill Bruns often drove for his trucking work. But investigators could not prove that Pearl had ever been there. Once again, they had no body. Part 10. The dog. Months had passed. Then investigators tried another approach. They brought in a cadaver dog trained to detect the scent of human decomposition. The dog searched the house and then moved to the basement. And suddenly, the dog stopped and it lay down. The signal that it had detected the scent of human remains right in the basement. But again, when investigators dug, they found nothing. The frustration was enormous. Detectives believed Pearl was there, somewhere. They could not prove it. Part 11. the technology that changed everything. Nearly a year after Pearl vanished, investigators tried something new. A technology rarely used in homicide investigations at the time: ground-penetrating radar. The device sends radio waves into the ground, and it measures changes in density. It's often used to locate buried tanks or underground structures. But investigators hoped that it might reveal something beneath the basement floor. When they ran the radar across the dirt crawl space, a strange pattern appeared. A blank space in the data, a place where the radar signal disappeared. And it was exactly where the cadaver dog had alerted months earlier. Detectives began digging again, and within just a few shovels, they struck plastic. Inside the ground, wrapped in black garbage bags, was the body of Pearl Bruns. She had been buried less than 3 feet beneath the basement floor. Her hands and feet were bound. She had been there the entire time, while the police searched, while investigators came and went, and while Bill Bruns continued living in the house the entire time, sleeping, eating, and walking above the place where his wife was buried. Part 12, The Arrest. When detectives walked upstairs, Bill Bruns was sitting at the kitchen table eating dinner. One detective looked at him and said, "Bill, we found Pearl." And Bill reportedly replied, "What do you mean?" Moments later, he was placed under arrest. Part 13, What Really Happened. The autopsy revealed the truth. Pearl had suffered multiple blows to the face, and her nose and orbital bone were fractured. She bled to death from those injuries. Investigators believed that Bill had punched her during an argument, and then he panicked and wrapped her body in trash bags and buried her beneath the basement floor. And he cleaned the house. The cleaning was not perfect, and over time, science exposed the truth. Part 14, The Plea Deal. In 1994, Bill Bruns was scheduled to go on trial for murder, but on the very day that his trial was set to begin, he made a decision. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter, not murder, manslaughter, and the sentence? 15 years in prison. But he wouldn't serve all of it. Bill Bruns was released in 2002, only after about 8 years behind bars. Part 15, The Final Twist. There was one more cruel twist in the case. During the autopsy, the medical examiner discovered something else. Pearl had terminal cancer. She likely had less than 6 months to live. Her daughter Elaine later said something haunting. If Bill had simply waited, Pearl would have died naturally, and instead, he killed her, and he buried her beneath their home. Part 16, Where Bill Bruns Ended Up. Records indicate that William Anders Bruns Sr. died April 2002. He was 90 years old. He lived another 20 years after leaving prison. Pearl Bruns was 47 when she died. There are reports that he went back to delivering and working in the seafood industry, and would even talk openly about the case. People who worked with him called him Wild Bill, and he accepted that. Pearl Bruns disappeared August 1991. For more than a year, her family searched for answers. The truth was beneath their feet the entire time. Buried in the basement, in a house that she once called home. And in the end, the man who claimed to love her was the one who put her there.